And some of that's right. You know, they are devils in a way. But at the same time, God can use those people to put us in remembrance for what our kids are going to be facing. And so, man, I'm very excited to have our speaker today. He comes from Broward County to be with us today, drove all that traffic to come down here. Would you please give it up for Robbie Barnes, please?
Sorry, I don't know how to get out of here. Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Tony. Appreciate you, man. What's up, man? How are you? Good to see you, bro. So right before you guys started, Tony's like, hey, man, how do you want me to introduce you? And I said, man, I'm cool. Whatever you want to do. I didn't know he was going to introduce me as the devil, which I think what literally happened. So next time I'll be a little bit more specific. Oh, cool, man. Thank you. So just a little bit of my background. Actually, first, we need to have can we have a Tony Isaacs conversation for a second before I get going? We just need to have a conversation about Tony. So I knew, like, over the last couple years that he did Taekwondo. Like, I knew that. Like, he was into doing Taekwondo and had been doing it for a long time. And so, like, I didn't really realize the full extent. So there's this girl that's at our church. I've known her for probably 10 years. Her name is Dee. And she's probably about 5 foot tall, but she is a Taekwondo, like all her adult life, Taekwondo instructor and Krav Maga instructor. So she's this tall, but dude, she could put you to sleep pretty quick. Like, she can jump and do like a flip kick and just knock you out, okay? She is the toughest, she's probably the toughest, scariest person that I know, okay? And she's on our stagehands team, and whenever she's backstage, I feel like so safe, okay? So I was just a couple weeks ago, I'm backstage, I'm about to go up to preach, and I said, oh, Dee, by the way, I met a pastor I know, down South Miami, and he does Taekwondo, and I think he's really into it. His name is Tony Isaacs. And she goes, oh, I know Tony Isaacs. I'm like, really? Yeah. She's like, you mean Master Chief Tony Isaacs? Chief Master? And I'm like, whoa, I mean, it's like, didn't know, I was like, should I bow to Tony? I don't know what I should do. I'm like, oh, like, and I said to her, because again, like, she's not afraid of anything. Like, she's the toughest person I think I've met. And I said, like, is he, like, pretty good? Like, if you, like, sparred him, what would happen? And she goes pale. I've never seen this before. She goes pale, like beads of sweat on her forehead. She gets panicky and she says, oh, I couldn't handle Tony Isaacs. I can't handle Tony Isaacs. And that's when I realized Tony is the kindest, gentlest, godliest man that could kill me in 2 seconds. Okay, so Master Chief Sensei, Jedi Master, Darth Tony Isaacs. I just want to pay my respects before I get going. Okay. I think he's into like scripture memory. Man, it's got to be scary around here if you don't memorize your verse, okay? So tell him what he's going to do to you. Anyway, so Tony asked me to share, talking about families, and I have a real heart for staff families and ministry families, and that's a big emphasis at with our staff team at West Pines. We talk a lot about this, and I'm going to share some thoughts. I'm going to just share a little bit of my background. My dad is a first-generation Christian. My mom comes from a long line of pastors and missionaries. I might be like the 7th in a row or something like that. My dad's side, I think it's like all criminals and thieves or something like that. I'm not sure, but so I come from a long line. I'm a pastor's kid myself, a pastor's grandkid, et cetera, et cetera. I say all that to say, though, I don't stand before you with any kind of expertise. I don't. I'm in this journey with you. I've got my wife, Rebecca, and I. We have a 5-year-old daughter, Scarlett, my 3-year-old son, Nehemiah, and then one on the way due Easter week. Perfect. That is perfect. So little girl coming, excited about that. But I'm not here as an expert. I'm just going to share some thoughts and just some things my wife and I have talked about over the years, and what we're trying to put into practice with our young family and things I learned growing up in a ministry family. Because it's a real thing being a staff kid or a pastor's kid. It's a real thing. It's hard for us. In fact, Josh is our worship leader. He's here with me today, hanging out also, and he's a pastor's kid. And that it's a real thing being a pastor's kid and a ministry kid. And so if there's anything I can share just from growing up as a PK and now having PKs who are PGKs, I guess also, if I can pass on any of that to some of you who are maybe first generation in the ministry and you have kids, man, please, it's a real thing. Because, as staff, it's hard on us spiritually for a multitude of reasons. First of all, like just spiritual warfare alone that we face, because things are happening at CF, things are happening at West Pines. We're moving the needle forward. We're taking turf for the kingdom of God. The enemy is not going to go down quietly. So there's a target on us as staff and on our staff families. Like that alone is enough. As staff, we expend ourselves spiritually, right? We're not just using other parts of ourselves. Like we wring ourselves out spiritually. So we don't just face physical, emotional, but spiritual exhaustion. But on top of that, what happens with staff is that we don't have all the legs of the stool to pull from spiritually. So for example, here's what I mean by that. Like in some ways we have an advantage and so people look in and like, oh man, you work at a church. I mean, you guys just you must just sit around and have your devotions all day. I mean, it must be great. And so on one hand, we get to do stuff like this. That's awesome. On one hand, yes, we have the front row seats of seeing people's lives changed, and we have all the emotional, spiritual dynamics of the ups and downs, and we get that benefit, but that helps offset some of the things we don't have. So because I preach on Sundays, a lot of Sundays, I don't get to sit under teaching every weekend like some do. Because of your worship team and our worship team, they don't get to sit under worship as often. Because you're leading small groups and setting up small groups, you don't necessarily just to get to sit and be like, oh, let me tell you about my week. Or how about this? Because you work with other staff, you can't complain about your coworkers in your small group like other people can. Okay. Or you shouldn't. Okay, maybe I need to make that clear. Some of you are like, wait, what? I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. Please don't do that, all right? We have some spiritual things that we're missing. So we have to work harder on the things which is why it's awesome that you have someone like Tony that's saying, no, seriously, we have to lean on the spiritual disciplines more. But that's not just for us. We cannot forget that affects our spouses and our kids. They deal with crazy stuff. I literally had to have a conversation with a teenager in our kids ministry because she was taking a selfie with my, at the time, 1-year-old and posting it on our Instagram. And I'm like, why are you taking selfies with my children? What was your name again? Please don't take selfies with my kids and put it on your Instagram. I mean, weird stuff. I don't want my daughter, this sweetheart, she's a little bit on the shy side, getting posted up on social media. It's crazy. So you get this extra layer of stuff that our kids face as staff kids and that our spouses journey with that we cannot forget about. Because a lot of times we get this, and a lot of times our staff kids and staff spouses sometimes don't pull from this that we have in a moment like this. So I want to just share, it's a real thing, and I just want to share some thoughts. We're going to look at Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting in verse 4. So grab your Bible app. There's an outline. I don't even know if we're going to get all the way through that outline, but we'll see what happens until Tony taekwondo's me off the stage, and then I'll leave. Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9 is what we're going to look at. Anyone know, this is a really, really famous, probably the most quoted passage in the Old Testament. Anyway, it's actually got a nickname. Anyone know what this passage nickname is? Anybody? The Shema. That's right. The Shema is what this might be the most quoted part around the world and throughout history of the entire Old Testament. Let's just read the first couple verses. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your, what's that word? on your hearts. Impress them on your children. So here's the very first thing that this says. It's very clear, familiar passage. Jesus quotes this. He says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all of your might, with all your strength. He's saying, man, you have to make God everything you've got, right? That's kind of what he's saying. Every faculty, heart, soul, mind, strength. It boils down to this. You have got to love God with everything you've got. He says, write it on your hearts. Write it down deep in your hearts. Digest it, memorize it, meditate it. You've got to write it deep down on your hearts. And look what he says. Look where he's eventually going to go in verse 7. Impress them on your children. But here's what you got to see. Before you impress it on your children, it's got to be in you. Like, we could probably just close the book and stop right there, because that is probably 90% of the game. Here, I want you to just fill this first one out. It sounds so obvious, but we need to actually write this down. Your love for Jesus has to be real. We're behind the curtain now, like we're all staff here. Like, that's not a given if you're on a church staff. Like, this is just us here talking. That's not a given if you're on a church staff. Your love for Jesus has to be real. Before you even start trying to impart with your kids, it's got to be in you. Here's why. Fundamental leadership principle, whether it's family, ministry, workplace, marketplace, whatever it is, fundamental leadership principle. You can teach what you know, but you replicate who you are. You know, we laugh at that adage, do as I say, not as I. We laugh at that because that doesn't work, right? Don't do what I do as I say. You know, if you've got your children one day, if your kids are learning how to drive, and you're like sitting next to them, and you've got that brake pedal that you keep pressing, and there's like nothing there, okay? And they're driving so fast, and they zoom right up behind someone and like hit the brakes, and you're like, what? You gotta slow down. Why are you coming up so fast behind that person right there? You gotta slow down, and you're getting frustrated. Ask yourself this question. Why does driving that fast up normal to them? Because they've been looking out the front window in the back seat for 6 years. You can teach what you know, but you replicate who you are. Your love for Jesus has to be real. And especially because you're on a church staff. Because of the dynamic. This is why that is absolutely mission critical, that you love Jesus, and that's real. Like it's vibrant. And if it's not vibrant, like, stop what you're doing and run with all you've got back in that direction. Why? Because here's what's going to happen with our kids. Our church is going to put each of us on a pedestal, our churches, and we're going to try and tell them not to. We're going to tell them not to do that. But churches have a tendency to put us up on a pedestal. And they're going to think we're perfect and got it all together. Our kids are going to know we are not perfect and don't have it all together. And the only thing that reconciles those two realities is if our kids know we don't have it all together. Because if the church thinks we've got it all together and they say things like, can I tell you, like, I love my mom and dad, Bob and Rosemary Barnes. I love them. They're amazing, amazing people. But can I tell you, if I had a dime for every time someone said, Bob and Rosemary Barnes are your parents? You're so lucky. They're parenting experts. They must have been the best parents in the world, okay? And that honestly could have crushed me, or it could be something I just kind of, okay, buddy, simmer down there, you know. Because I know that they're amazing, but they're not perfect. So here's the key. Do they know they're not perfect? Do they love Jesus so much that they know the gospel? One practical thing, do I confess to my kids when I mess up? Because that's the gospel. Hey, son, look, Dad yelled at you. And I'm sorry. That's not what a godly man does. Like, do they see the gospel? Is that love for Jesus real? Because I'm going to replicate that in them. They have got to see that, because everything else they're going to hear around them about us is a false perspective. They're going to see the real thing. Love for Jesus has to be real. Here's the second part that's got to be real. Your love for church has to be real. We've all seen the behind the curtains where there's a church staff or a department or a person where church becomes their craft. It becomes their industry. It becomes their expertise. It becomes the thing that they put on. But do you really just believe what we're saying about church? Do you believe it? Is it just your expertise, or is it do you believe it? You love the church. I was backstage about to go on the final song, and one of our musicians, he's a fantastic musician, and he's one of those guys that just worships, truly you can tell, is worshiping. And I'm watching him worship, and I know he and his wife have been struggling to have children, and he's had multiple miscarriages. And backstage, with their closer perspective of church, the craft, the industry, the biz, or do they have a closer perspective of the real thing? Do I just really love the community, the body that is the church? We've got to have that love, because it can drift. It can drift into that perspective where I've also seen the opposite, where I've seen, a speaker who's kind of cutting up and just kind of acting, just a lot of low reverence, then goes out and wows the crowd and has them in tears and everyone's coming to Christ, and then comes back off and walks off the stage, and there's just no gravity in what they're doing. Or the worship team that's all hanging out and joking and talking about stuff beforehand. There's no prayer, there's no sincerity. They go out, bring everyone to tears, and then walk back off, and it's just like a gig. Is this a gig? Because that's what we're training our kids. They're going to see that. I think there's a lot of pastors' kids that grow up knowing how to do the industry and the craft. But do they see a deeper love for the church? And man, we know it's harder to love the church sometimes as a staff, because we get wounded by the church. And we can stiff arm it by making it just our craft. 2 tips on that. Protect their perspective and be the body. I had an opportunity to network with some pastors that are from other parts of the world, and I was talking to this one guy. I was blown away by this dude. His dad founded a church in Chennai, India, that has 50,000 people or something like that, and he grew up in this church, and he's probably going to take over the church. He's running the English side of it. And I was thinking about that we were going to be talking about this, so I asked him, I said, man, how did you survive as a pastor's kid? And he said, man, I sometimes think it was a miracle. He said, because I look at most of my contemporaries, the other pastors' kids, and they didn't make it. And I said, well, what made it work for you? And the one thing he said was, my parents never brought the drama home. And they never talked about the church drama at the kitchen table. They protected their kids' perspective. Why? Because your kids need pastors and ministers too. And so, man, guard what they hear. I mean, you need to dialogue this with your wife or your husband. But if you're these little ears, and man, they pick up stuff way earlier than we think they do, and way earlier than we want them to. And man, when they're hearing us just talk negatively about the church and the drama, they're not mature enough for that. That takes maturity to be able to deal with that. They're children. Protect their perspective. Here's the other thing. Be the body. My great-grandfather was a missionary back and forth from Denmark. And so his wife was obviously an MK. She lived in the States. My grandma marrying into that family was also an MK. And so before she got married to my grandfather, her mother-in-law, are you tracking with this? Is making any sense? I'm confused. Okay. She tells my great-grandma tells her daughter-in-law, my grandma, hey, by the way, just so you know, you'll never be able to have friends in your church. It's just too hard. It's too much drama. It's just too complicated. And that's bad advice. Be the body. We are not standing outside the body like a surgeon operating on it. We're not standing outside the worship service. I don't like it when there's a worship service and the staff is standing outside, not in the seats. We're not outside the body putting it together. You are theologically, biblically a piece of it. Let the body minister to you, to your family, have real friends. Because here's the thing, my kids will never get to see, I'm not making any assumptions about my kids going into the ministry. My son, he might do something else in the ministry. Here's what he will never get to see. He will never see what it looks like for a dad to wake up on Sunday and take his family to church. He will never be directly trained except for a couple times a year on what that looks like. So he's already down that opportunity. I want to make sure he sees what it likes to be a part of the body. You're not outside it, you're inside it. Okay. There's no way we're going to get through this whole list. Deuteronomy 6:7. Let's keep going. I'll do my best. Don't hurt me, Tony. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down. I lost where I was. And when you lie down and when you get up. Okay, I want to look at the other side of this. Did you notice that it says before you impress them on your children, it's got to be real with you. But I want to look at this now the opposite way. When it's real with you, what's the first thing then you're going to do? The first thing when it's real to you is the first instinct will be to impress it to your children. And so here's this really simply, this next point. When it's real, it's family first. If it's real in your heart, your first mode is to training your kids and training your family. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but let me just put it like this. If you have a successful ministry, but not at home, is that success? Campus pastors, if you have a thriving, growing campus and people are becoming disciples, but your precious, sweet children and your wives are spiritually drowning, who cares? You run kids ministry. Some of you men and ladies who run kids ministry, you're discipling, setting up the systems that disciple all the other children and your own children. If they're not discipled, who cares? First line is your family. It has to start there. I mean, that should be the first thing you pray for, the first thing you vision for, the first thing you dream for. Do I spend more time strategically crafting my ministry strategy at work or at home? How many goals do I have at church? Do I have spiritual goals for the small church in my house? Do I have milestones for these leaders I'm raising up? Do I have milestones for my precious children? Those other people can find another pastor. Your kids can't find another mom and dad. Man, when it's real, the first line of defense is with their children. Here's what he says. Let's keep going in verse 8. Before we get into this, here's what do you notice it says? Well, let me just read it. It says, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. What is them in this context? Did you catch that? The word specifically says the commands. So this is the law. So he's saying bind the law on your forehead and bind them on your hands. But let me just do a little theological work here. The law, okay, what's our relationship to the law? Because we got to look at this from a Christian perspective, from a Christ perspective. Our relationship to the law is freedom, right? We are freed from the law. Jesus said, he opened up the Sermon on the Mount, and what he says is, I have not come to abolish the law, but to what? He fulfilled the law. Jesus perfectly fulfills all the law to the point that now we are in him. So Colossians 3 says we are hidden in Christ. So we don't look at the law, we look at a person, Jesus. It's Jesus. Our relationship is to Jesus. His relationship is to the law. We are in him. We've been dead and raised through Christ. So when it's talking, I think the Christian way to read the Shema, what are we tying on our heads and tying on our hands? It's Jesus. It's the gospel. And so look at this. He says, tying them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Okay, if you're tying something on your forehead, can you see it? No, you can't see it. It's like that game, maybe you've done the party game or youth group game or whatever, and you put something on your head, or you put something, there's actually this little kids game. They have these headbands. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? And you put a Disney character right there, and then you try and guess what it is. Okay, I was playing this with my kids and my daughter. It's really funny playing it with little kids, because I put it in and I said, okay, am I an animal? And my daughter says, no, can I give you a hint? I said, no, honey, I can do it. And she says, okay, you swim under the sea. You're like a person, but you have fins at the bottom. You're a girl, and you have a little friend who's a crab named Sebastian. Am I a mermaid? Yes, you're a mermaid. Okay. If you put it on your head, everyone else can see it, but you can't. But what's that old thing that they used to do if you wanted to remember something? Do you remember what you used to do? Tie a string on your finger. So if you're tying something on your hand, that's for you. If you're tying it on your face, it's for everybody else. Okay, so here, let's look at these 2 points here. Next point, keep the gospel. So we're tying Jesus. Keep the gospel in front of your face. That's what you're tying to your hand. Jesus. Keep the gospel before your face. Let me ask you, when it comes to your kids, you've got to look at your kids through the lenses of the gospel, please. Because there's pressure on you. There's pressure on you to have perfect kids. And if then your kids embarrass you, that means you're being affected, your identity, by what other people think of you. But where do you find your identity? You keep Christ right in front of you. So if the moment I'm embarrassed by my kids, that's a reminder of, I have a fear of man issue. I care more about what they think. And then that makes me think, man, has there ever been times I've disciplined my kids through the lens of embarrassment? Have they seen it written on my face? That I'm communicating that I'm embarrassed by them? Have I made them feel like they've let me down because I feel like I've let the masses down? Man, their souls, they have their own journey. Every other child is allowed to have their own journey. Your children have their own journey. Here's the next thing. Then also make your face a reflection of the gospel. I was realizing how important this was with my daughter. I've had a third, and I have to remind them of it. But you know that our kids, their default heart position is religion, right? Every child's default position is I obey to get acceptance. But the gospel is I accept you first. And that leads to obedience. And I had this conversation with my daughter once. She was probably 4, and we'd had a rough day. There'd been a lot of redirection in the morning, and she goes down to nap, and she gets up, and we're sitting across the table, and she's having snack. And I said to her, I'm like, you know what, I need to check in with her because it was rough. And I said, sweetheart, I said, does Daddy love you when you're being silly? And she laughs, says, yes. And I said, does Daddy love you when you're listening well? Yes. Does Daddy love you when you're being a good big sister? Yes, Daddy loves me. And then I stopped and I said, sweetheart, does Daddy love you when you're not listening well? And she put her snack down. And she dropped her little face and she says, no. And I walked around the table and I said, I've got to ram this home for her so she never forgets it. And I walked around to her, and I turned her in her seat, and I knelt down, and I grabbed her face, and I looked her right in the eyes, and I said, "Sweetheart, there is nothing you will ever do that will change how much I love you." Because what they see in our faces is what's preaching to them who God is. Tie the gospel around your face. We're out of time. Let me hit verse 9. Tony's going to karate chop me or whatever he does. Can I go a little longer, Tony? Okay. Verse 9. Write them on the door frames of your house and on your gates. Your door frames and your gates, I think this is a protection issue. And so let me just pivot here to this group. We have to protect each other. Okay? You've got to protect each other and the expectations on each other's kids. So here's the last one, is more about building culture at CF, is protect this house. Let me give you 3 tips. Protect this house. First of all, this has to be a no judgment zone. And you have to help build that in each other's ministry, okay, for a no judgment zone. About a few weeks ago, I was giving an illustration about my son. My son has he's 3. He has like an extra dose of testosterone. Clearly, he got it from his mother's side, okay? I don't know how that happened, but he's a tough guy, okay? And I was preaching on how and I can get away with this kind of illustration because he's little. I'll spare him a little more when he gets older, but I was telling this illustration about how, I know my son is going to punch people. It's happening. So I'm more training him, when the appropriate time to punch someone is, okay? If you're protecting someone, then punch them. I'm not going to get rid of the punching. You just have to channel it, okay? I'm preaching that in the second service. While I'm preaching it, he's punching someone in the kids ministry, okay? And luckily, the kids ministry person who is there was in the first service. So she comes up and says, "Nehemiah, did you punch that kid?" And he's like, "Yeah." she's like, "Were you protecting someone?" She jumped right on to help me out, okay? But what I don't need, because my son's on his own journey, and I like that he's tough. I'd rather dial back the punching rather than be like, "Dude, you got to punch someone, okay, sometime." I'd rather dial it back. This kid's going to be a warrior. I'm just channeling it to be about Jesus. But what I don't need is a church that's stepping back or a staff saying, "Oh, did you see the pastor's son punch somebody?" I don't need that. And my son doesn't need that. Because anybody else's kid can punch someone and have a bad day. I need it okay that my son has a bad day. And so what I need is the kids ministry workers, when someone's whispering or gossiping, to step up and be like, "Excuse me. This guy is on a journey. This young man is on a journey. We're on a privilege to being part of this journey." This has got to be a no judgment zone. Here's the second thing. Break the rules. Break the rules for staff kids and staff spouses. There is this thing that happens in church where they take the expectations of staff kids and staff spouses and they say, they've got to reach the highest expectation. There's more on them than anybody else. That's wrong. There's a former kids ministry director at West Pines, emphasis on the former, that one time I dropped the kids off. My kids were my wife dropped the kids off, and dropped Nehemiah off, my son, and my son was just crying because, he was 18 months, all kids go through that stage. They don't want to get dropped off. Even though he's there all the time, he just didn't want to get dropped off. And he was calling for my daughter, who's not in that classroom. And one of the kids ministry workers, who, by the way, now is our kids ministry director, said, "Hey, Scarlett, why don't you go into his class?" That breaks one of our rules. So after the service, at the end, the kids ministry director walks in and they're upset. And they say, that breaks our rules, and your family has to uphold the ultimate rules. If you're not modeling it, who's not? And I said, let me tell you something. My wife is a single mom every weekend. We're going to take care of my wife, and we're going to take care of my kids. So if that breaks the rules, it's going to break the rules. Break the rules for staff wives and staff kids. Here's the last thing. Here's the last thing. Honor. Hey, CF, honor in every direction. Honor your volunteers. Honor up the chain. Honor down the chain. Honor next to you. But you know probably who you should honor the most? Staff spouses and staff kids. Honor them. Please honor them. Lift up these wives, these pastors' wives. They take just as many bullets, and sometimes more. Let me just close with this thought. Galatians 6:17. Paul says, he ends his book, "From now on, let no one cause me trouble." Listen to this. "For I bear on my body the marks of Jesus." He bears on his body the marks of Jesus. So here's what I was thinking. Like, stay with me on this. I'm going to push the envelope theologically a little bit. This is where my brain is. When Jesus rose from the dead, his scars were still there, right? Thomas touched him. He said, "Hey, come see." Like his new body, he's the firstborn of all creation. So his risen body, that gives us a picture of what our risen bodies look like. His scars were still there. Aren't you looking forward to weeping on those scars one day? Paul says he bears the marks of Christ on his body. And it made me wonder, if Jesus' body is a picture of what our bodies are going to be like, will the saints bear the scars that they took in the name of Jesus? And it made me think of the pastor I grew up under and what it would be like one day to just see the scars he took that I never knew so that I could be discipled. I wonder what it will be like to weep on the scars of the people who've taken those pains so that a church can grow. That's why you honor pastors' wives and pastors' kids and staff husbands and staff wives. Because they bear scars silently that no one ever sees. That's why you protect them and honor them and encourage them and lift them up. And that's why these little children, they're asked and called by God. It's a high calling. But they're going to take scars too. When all of a sudden a family's no longer at a church and they're talking bad about their daddy. And all they know is they lost a friend. Honor them. Let's take care of staff families more than anyone else in the church, unapologetically. Because healthy families, I think, is a healthy church, and that's our first line. I've eaten through all of your discussion time, so how about I just pray over you and your staff families? Lord, I pray over every one of these warriors in here, these men and women who've signed up for your service. And I pray for each one of their wives, their husbands, their future wives, future husbands. I pray over their children, their grandchildren. I pray over their future children. I pray over, if there's any couples in a room like this, couples who are wanting children and having trouble, Lord, I pray you would bless them with children, please, soon. I ask your protection over this staff family. And I pray that you would build a culture that protects these men and women that serve alongside their husbands and wives, and these sweet lambs that are the children and grandchildren of these warriors. Protect them and bless them.